Stop what you are doing right now and pay very close attention to what I am about to walk you through. This is not a simulation. It is not a political opinion. It is the publicly documented, on-the-record strategic position of every major military power on this planet. And when you lay those positions side by side on a single map, a picture forms that no news channel, no government press briefing, no think tank summary is assembling for you in full. Here is that picture. As of May 2026, there are 3 active military flashpoints burning simultaneously on this Earth: Ukraine, the Taiwan Strait, and the Middle East. 3 separate theaters, 3 separate sets of alliance commitments already triggered. And the only thing separating all 3 of those fires from a single global conflagration is one variable: one miscalculation, one ship through the wrong strait, one missile over the wrong airspace, and the alliance systems that have kept these wars contained snap together in a cascade that every government on Earth has privately wargamed and every government on Earth publicly refuses to discuss. Most people watching those 3 fires assume they are watching 3 separate crises. They are not. They are watching one structure, and the structure has a shape. Every country on this planet has already made a quiet decision about where it stands. Some have signed that decision in formal treaties. Some have signed it in oil contracts, some have signed it in silence. The map of who goes where and how fast is not the map most people are carrying right now. This is the correct map. The analytical frame I am using is what strategic planners call the 4 rings of global conflict. Ring 1, the direct combatants. Countries already in this war or committed within 72 hours of escalation. Ring 2, the swing states and enablers. Countries whose decision determines which side has the resources to sustain a long war. Ring 3, the economic weapon countries. Countries that fire no bullets but control the systems the world runs on. Ring 4, the wild cards. Unpredictable actors whose entry changes every other calculation on the board. Now the number that anchors everything. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists maintains the Doomsday Clock, a calibrated assessment by a body that currently includes 13 Nobel laureates. As of January 2026, that clock sits at 89 seconds to midnight. Here is what makes that number staggering. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, 13 days in October 1962, the closest America and the Soviet Union ever came to nuclear exchange, the clock sat at 7 minutes to midnight. Today, we are closer to the end point of human civilization than at any moment in the entire history of the nuclear age. By the end of this, you will understand the geography of a world war better than the overwhelming majority of people who will read tomorrow's headlines. Great powers do not go to war because they are angry. They go to war because the system that was keeping them separated stops functioning. That is not a theory. That is the documented pattern of every major power conflict in modern history. And the system keeping the great powers separated right now has already stopped functioning. What we are watching is the aftermath. And most people have not noticed. World War I did not begin because Franz Ferdinand was shot. That assassination was a spark. The combustible structure underneath, interlocking alliance obligations, colonial competition over a shrinking set of resources, mobilization timetables that ran automatically once triggered, that structure had been accumulating for 30 years. Historian Christopher Clark, in his landmark study of 1914, described the leaders who started that war as sleepwalkers. Men who walked confidently into a catastrophe they could see approaching but found themselves structurally unable to stop. That description is a live portrait of 2026. There is a specific mechanism in strategic planning called the alliance cascade. It describes exactly how a contained conflict becomes a global one. Not because anyone made a deliberate choice to start a world war, but because treaty obligations, resource dependencies, and geographic logic pull country after country into the fire once the first significant threshold is crossed. NATO's Article 5 is the clearest example. One member is attacked and all 32 respond. That clause has never been invoked in 75 years. The conditions for invoking it have never been more structurally present than they are right now. And here are the 3 active fuses sitting underneath it. Ukraine is the first. Russia's full-scale invasion, launched in February 2022, has not resolved. As of early 2026, Western intelligence assessments place Russian troop commitment on the Eastern Front above 700,000. Ukraine has received over $175 billion in combined military and economic support, according to the Kiel Institute for the World Economy's Tracker, as of March 2026. This is not a frozen conflict. This is a live war with live alliance commitments hardening on both sides, and the next escalation threshold has already been discussed in both Moscow and Brussels. What that threshold is and how close we are to it is the question I will come back to. Taiwan is the second fuse. Xi Jinping has, on the public record, directed the People's Liberation Army to develop the capability to reunify Taiwan by 2027. That directive was documented in a Pentagon assessment reported by Reuters in January 2023. The PLA now fields the world's largest navy by number of hulls and 2 million active duty troops, according to the U.S. Department of Defense annual China Military Power Report as of 2025. If Taiwan is activated, the United States, Japan, and Australia are all in, by treaty, by geography, or by the logic of strategic necessity. What that activation looks like in the first 72 hours is something no Western government has described publicly. But the war game results exist. The Middle East is the third. Iran's proxy network, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, Iraqi militias in Mesopotamia, stretches across the most oil-dense geography on the planet. Israel is in an active multi-front conflict. The United States has carrier groups positioned in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Arabian Gulf simultaneously. 3 separate vectors of potential escalation, geographically overlapping, all converging on the same 21-mile-wide waterway that I will come back to in detail. 3 fires, 3 sets of alliance commitments, all burning at the same moment in history. And here is what none of that tells you, and this is the part that matters most. One country in this analysis has already conducted a classified strategic simulation of all 3 flashpoints igniting simultaneously. And in that simulation, they chose neither side. They waited, and by waiting, within 18 months, they held effective control over the global oil supply and became indispensable to every belligerent. That country is not America. It is not China. It is not Russia. Stay with me. Ring 1, the direct combatants. The United States enters this war not by political choice, but by mathematical obligation. America holds formal defense commitments with 55 countries. Its Navy operates the only fleet of aircraft carrier strike groups, 11 of them, capable of projecting military force into all 5 oceans simultaneously. The U.S. defense budget for fiscal year 2025 stands at $886 billion according to the Congressional Budget Office, more than the next 10 countries combined. But here is the problem with that number, and this is critical. America is already overextended. The national debt crossed $36 trillion in April 2026, according to the U.S. Treasury Department. Support for Ukraine has drawn down precision munitions stockpiles faster than the American defense industrial base can replace them, a fact documented in a RAND Corporation assessment leaked to Politico in late 2024. The assessment concluded that the U.S. military cannot sustain 3 simultaneous high-intensity conflicts without strategic prioritization, meaning in a 3-front world war, 1 theater gets fully defended and 2 get managed. That is the real military position of the most powerful country on earth. Russia is Ring 1's second actor, already in a war economy. Defense spending rose to 7.1% of GDP in 2025, according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, a wartime structural number. Russia cannot withdraw from Ukraine without domestic political collapse, which means Russia is a committed combatant regardless of how or whether the war expands. China is the variable that transforms a regional war into a global one. China's annual trade with the United States stands at $575 billion as of 2024, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. That economic relationship is the single constraint keeping China as a strategic competitor rather than a military adversary. The moment that relationship ends, by sanctions, by military incident, by formal alliance commitment to Russia, China has nothing economically left to lose. And a China with nothing to lose is the scenario that strategic planners describe in declassified language as the most consequential risk on the board. Now Ring 2. India is the most consequential swing state on the planet. 1.4 billion people, the world's 5th largest economy, and deliberately positioned in neither camp. As of 2025, India sources 40% of its crude oil from Russia, according to India's Petroleum Planning and Analysis Cell, a proportion that doubled after Western sanctions on Russian energy. India simultaneously holds over $100 billion in Russian-origin military equipment and is a Quad member, the strategic grouping with America, Japan, and Australia designed explicitly to counterbalance Chinese naval expansion. India will not choose a side. And that non-choice is itself a strategic decision, one that deprives the Western alliance of the largest military mass in the non-aligned world. Turkey is NATO's most dangerous internal contradiction, a Western alliance member since 1952, Also the country that purchased Russia's S-400 air defense system and was sanctioned by Washington for doing so. Under Erdogan, Turkey has positioned itself as indispensable to both sides and formally accountable to neither, a position that becomes exponentially more powerful the more desperate both sides become. And then there is Saudi Arabia. The kingdom controls 12% of global oil production. Its OPEC plus coordination with Russia, formalized in the Vienna Agreement, means Riyadh and Moscow already share a structural economic interest in elevated oil prices, regardless of who is shooting at whom. Mohammed bin Salman is not a strategic ally of the West. He is a strategic businessman. In a World War scenario, his calculation is straightforward. Who offers the most durable deal? And the answer determines what happens to the global economy before a single NATO soldier crosses a border. Which brings us to the country I told you about, the one that waited. Here is where the alliance cascade, the swing state calculation, and the oil weapon all converge into the scenario that no government will state plainly. And the reason none of them will say it out loud is precisely the reason you need to hear it. Ring 3. The economic weapon countries. Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz. That is not a metaphor. The Strait of Hormuz is a 21-mile-wide waterway through which, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, 21% of the world's entire daily oil supply passes. 21%. Through a channel narrower than many rivers. Iran has explicitly stated and demonstrated in military exercises that it can close the strait within hours using naval mines, anti-ship missile batteries, and fast-attack boat swarms operating in shallow coastal waters where carrier strike groups cannot operate effectively. In 2019, when Iran shot down an American surveillance drone over the Gulf, oil prices spiked 15% within 48 hours before any actual supply disruption had occurred. The psychological weapon is almost as powerful as the physical one. If the strait closes, Gulf states cannot export. Japan, South Korea, India, and China, all major Asian economies, cannot import the energy that runs their industrial output. European energy markets, already structurally destabilized by the Russia-Ukraine war, absorb a second simultaneous shock. The cascade through inflation, food prices, and supply chains that still operate on just-in-time delivery hits ordinary households within weeks, not months, weeks. This is where your grocery bill enters the map. Ring 4, the wildcards. North Korea. The Arms Control Association estimates North Korea holds between 40 and 50 operational nuclear warheads as of 2025. Kim Jong-un has been supplying Russia with artillery shells, confirmed by South Korean intelligence in late 2023 and verified by NATO. The exchange has been documented. What North Korea received in return has not been publicly disclosed. Whatever it was, it made a nuclear North Korea marginally more capable, and a nuclear North Korea that has been paid in undisclosed technology by the country it is now formally supporting. That is an actor whose behavior in a global escalation scenario no model has reliably predicted. Pakistan is the variable most war maps omit entirely, and should not. 240 million people, a nuclear arsenal of approximately 170 warheads, according to the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists 2025 estimate. A military intelligence apparatus with documented historical connections to non-state actors across South and Central Asia, and a land border with both Afghanistan and Iran. In a scenario where Iran activates and China commits, the question of where Pakistan's military leadership places its formal loyalty is not abstract. It is a live and consequential question. The Global South is Ring 4's third actor and its least visible. Over 50 countries are now formally aligned with or commercially integrated into the BRICS Plus framework. They will not send soldiers, but they will continue buying Russian energy, settling trade in non-dollar currencies, and declining Western sanctions pressure, which means the economic weapons the West relies on become progressively less effective the longer a conflict runs. Russia's trade settled in Chinese yuan rose from 0.4% of total trade to 34% between 2021 and 2023, according to Russia's central bank data. That number has continued rising. The architecture of a parallel financial system is not a future project. It is an operational present. Before the final section of this map, something deserves a full stop. Every number in this analysis carries a human weight that strategic language compresses into abstraction. Ukraine alone, one war, one country, 3 years, has produced between 70,000 and 120,000 military deaths, according to Western intelligence assessments as of early 2026. 7 million Ukrainians are displaced across Europe, according to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. These are not projections from a hypothetical World War scenario. These are the numbers from one front. A global conflict multiplies those figures across a scale that the human mind genuinely struggles to hold. The people inside these calculations are not pieces on a strategic board. Every decision made in Washington, Moscow, Beijing, Tehran, and Riyadh lands on a family somewhere. That is what is actually at stake. And now, the probability. The Rand Corporation's 2024 assessment, declassified portions reported by Politico, places the likelihood of a significant U.S.-China military incident over Taiwan at between 25% and 35% within 5 years. That estimate was made before the current escalation pattern in the Taiwan Strait. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, a body of 13 Nobel laureates, places the collective risk of nuclear use at its highest level since the early 1950s. These are not fringe numbers from alarmist analysts. These are the measured, attributed assessments of the most credentialed risk institutions in the world. Wars almost never start because everyone decided they wanted one. They start because nobody watched the dominoes fall until it was too late. What I want you to take from this is not fear. Fear is not useful. What is useful is the map. Because when you understand the structure, you can see the trajectory before it becomes a headline. And that is the most consequential thing you can hold in a world that is moving this fast. Now the counter-argument, because it deserves a fair hearing. The strongest case against a world war is the economic interdependence argument. America and China trade $575 billion annually. Their financial systems are interlocked in ways that make mutual economic destruction nearly automatic in a military conflict. Serious economists with serious credentials look at everything I have just described and conclude that the price of war is too high for rational actors to accept, and that the system will find a way back from every edge it approaches. It is a compelling argument. It has one historical problem. In 1913, 1 year before the most destructive war in human history up to that point, British economist Norman Angell published The Great Illusion, arguing that European economies were so interdependent that a major war had become economically irrational and therefore effectively impossible. His book sold widely across Europe. His argument was analytically correct. The war happened anyway. Economic rationality is not the primary driver of great power conflict. Prestige, domestic political survival, ideology, and miscalculation are. And in 2026, all four are elevated simultaneously across every major power. What actually determines whether the dominoes fall is leadership quality at the exact moment of crisis. The Cuban Missile Crisis did not end in nuclear exchange because Kennedy and Khrushchev, two leaders with every political and military incentive to escalate, found a communication channel narrow enough to use but sufficient to pull back from. That channel existed because both men understood precisely what the other could not say publicly. That quality of leadership, the capacity to find the exit without losing face, is the single variable that separates a close call from a catastrophe. Whether that leadership quality exists today in the capitals that matter is a question each person watching this will answer for themselves. Now, the countries that actually benefit. Australia holds the strategic position that most analysts underestimate. Geographically insulated from all three active flashpoints, Australia sits on some of the world's largest reserves of lithium, uranium, and rare earth elements, the materials that every military and every clean energy industrial base require. In a prolonged global conflict where supply chains fracture and resource access becomes the central strategic competition, Australia becomes indispensable to whichever coalition it aligns with. That alignment is the most consequential foreign policy decision Canberra will make. Brazil occupies a similar structural position, the largest economy in Latin America. Agricultural surplus in a world where food supply chains are among the earliest casualties of major conflict. Geographic distance from every active theater. Brazil's deliberate non-alignment positions it as the country that feeds the world while the great powers exhaust each other. The country I told you about at the 4-minute mark, the one that waited in the classified simulation and ended up controlling the global oil supply, is Saudi Arabia. In the scenario modeled, Riyadh formally declared neutrality, continued selling oil to every belligerent at elevated prices, and used the resulting capital to build the infrastructure for a post-war regional order centered on the Gulf. Mohammed bin Salman's strategic positioning, non-aligned, resource-rich, indispensable, is not accidental. It is the deliberate calculation of a government that has studied every previous world war and drawn one consistent conclusion. The country that sells to both sides while losing no soldiers is the country that emerges with the most leverage. One final variable that belongs on every map and appears on almost none. The first phase of WW3 will not be announced. It will not begin with a naval battle or a ground invasion. It will begin in orbit and in cyberspace. China, Russia, and the United States have each tested anti-satellite capabilities. Every GPS network, every financial clearing system, every supply chain platform that depends on satellite infrastructure is a legitimate military target before a single soldier crosses a border. The war, if it comes, begins when screens go dark and signals go quiet. By the time any government announces that hostilities have commenced, the first phase will already be over. That is the map, not the one with colored borders and national flags. The real one, with alliance tripwires, oil choke points, satellite constellations, and swing states making quiet calculations right now about which world they want to inhabit when this resolves. Watch three things. Watch Taiwan Strait crossing numbers, military ship transits in both directions. Watch the yuan settlement percentage in Russia's trade data, and watch the Doomsday clock. Those three data points will tell you which direction this is heading before any headline announces it. Wars almost never start because everyone decided they wanted one. They start because nobody watched the dominoes fall until it was too late. Someone has to say it out loud. Now, you know.